few days ago, I had the privilege of interviewing two Algerian internationals, Ismael Bennacer and Amine Gouiri, at La Commanderie, Olympique de Marseille's training complex. The interview really changed the way I think about footballers as humans. More details up next on the African Five-A-Side podcast. Welcome back to the African Football Report on the African Five-A-Side podcast. I'm your host, Maher Mezahi, and as always, this show is brought to you by africasacountry.com. On africasacountry.com, there's a really good article at the moment called The Wrong Way to End Aid, speaking about the new regime in the US with Trump and Musk and how they've sort of shot down US aid. This author makes the argument that ending US aid is not necessarily a bad thing, but there's a right way of doing it and a wrong way of doing it. So if you're interested in that at all, I'll put a link to the article in the description below. First of all, apologies. I'm sick. I might be sniffling and sneezing and coughing throughout this episode. So really sorry about that. But hopefully you can stay patient with me and make do. The other thing is, yeah, I've been away for some time. It's been more than a week since we shot an episode due to other responsibilities. I didn't really get a chance to watch too much football this weekend, but I did get a chance prior to the weekend to go to Marseille and to speak to footballers and think about football in a way that I haven't in a very long time. So we just wanted to get in the habit of podcasting and really share with you some of my reflections from interviewing these two Algerian internationals, Ismael Bennacer and Amine Gouiri. So the first thing is that, I wanted to reflect. The first thing that really comes to mind when I finished the shoot and I came home was, this is really cool. It's such a privilege being a football journalist. I'm one of those people that I remember could, watch football from 7 in the morning until 10 in the evening and really spend my whole day just doing just that. And so when you're passionate about football I was writing about football before I ever became a journalist. I was blogging about it, and now I get a chance to get paid to speak to players. I mean, it's just obviously you don't get paid a lot as a football journalist. I think most people know that, but like just the fact that you get to live out your passion is something that I'm really thankful for. Um, the other thing is, when I spoke to some family members, told them that I might be, interviewing these two Algerian internationals. And you have to understand, in Algeria, players that play for the national team are stars. So immediately it's like, that's so cool. Tell them this, pass this message on, ask them to sign this shirt. And of course, you can't do any of that because you have to remain professional. As a journalist, your reputation really is everything. And if you lose that, you don't have a career. And you have to remain professional. You can't be like asking players, hey, can you do this? At least not when, you're interviewing them. If you meet them informally outside, that might be another thing, but not on company time. The other aspect is that, so yeah, I think it can be a little bit overrated though. That's the second reflection that I had, like I think people from the outside think it's super cool. But when you look back at it, like it's not like I got to spend a huge amount of time with these players and I learned so much about them. Everything is very structured. Me as a freelance independent journalist, if I contact Olympique de Marseille and ask them, hey, I want to interview these two players, there's probably a less than 1% chance that they would have accorded the interview to me, because there's going to be millions and millions of requests like that. But because I was being contracted by the Ligue 1 show, which is the French league, which is a partner of l'Olympique de Marseille, the French league works on Marseille and they say, please, this is a good cross promotion. It's going to raise the profile of the club in the Middle East, North Africa markets, etc. Olympique de Marseille goes, okay, we'll give you 20 minutes. And those 20 minutes, I swear to you, there's a communications officer looking over your shoulder. You have to usually send the questions over so that they can greenlight it. Then some of the players, sometimes they want to look at the questions. And it's as if sometimes you feel like, you're an interrogator for the FBI or the CIA. And the communications officer is like a lawyer for some kind of wanted fugitive or something like that. Are you sure you're okay? You sure you're okay talking to them? You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to. So you feel like in such a controlled environment, it's very difficult to glean anything, right? To get any insight whatsoever. But that said, I think within those 20 minutes, I did get a little bit of insight. So first of all, Ismael Bennacer, and he's a player that, I mean, if just speaking about his personal behavior, just as a person, there are players, you don't even have to meet them, and just people, you don't even have to meet them, but you just see that he's got a good head on his shoulders, barely makes eye contact. Maybe it's because he's shy. Maybe it's because, he's humble. Um, he always took a second or two before responding to any questions to think about what he was going to say, and even took breaks between sentences as well. And he's just somebody that I've never heard anybody say a bad thing about, and mm, you easily assume that he's just such a great person. Um, Actually, in our culture, there's a saying, something along the lines of, if God likes somebody, then God tells the angels to like that somebody, and the angels sing their praises, and then humans naturally like that person as well. And so sometimes, there are just people like that in the world where everybody likes that person, you know. And I think Ben Nasser is clearly one of those people. Um, and so what I wanted to find out about him was what pushes you, because at the age of 27 now, he's had a full career. He signed at Milan, he signed at Arsenal, he's played in the Champions League, he's played at, he's won a Scudetto with Milan after a long, long period of time of them not winning it. He's played in AFCONs. He's won an AFCON. He was named best player at an AFCON. It's like when you have a career like that and you play, those experience those high of highs, and then you also experience very, very low lows because over the last 18 to 24 months, he's really suffered with knee injuries, calf injuries, foot injuries. Like, what pushes you now, when you're 27 at that age and you started playing so young? Like, what motivates you the most? And he responded in a way that I think is not really surprising, but just reinforces a lot of the confidence I have in him and his mindset as a player. And he just said, excellence is about doing it again and again and again and again and again. It's about that consistency of showing up every day, training, doing well so you can do well in the match, so you can at the very end, have a good career. And it's not something that surprises me from him because I remember Thierry Henry used to be his coach at Arsenal, the youth coach there, and he placed a pretty penny on Benasser's success, saying that this player, after training, he's one of the only ones that stays back for 10, 15 minutes and tries to work on something in his game that he's not really good at. And so just wonderful bullet mindset, and the fact that I could see that he still wants to have success and do it again and again and again and again. I think that's good news for the Algerian national team and their fans. And I wouldn't be surprised actually if, once Mahrez moves on or maybe he's not a starter anymore, if Ismael Bennacer is our next captain. For Amin Gouiri, as I was speaking to Bennacer initially and we were talking about the AFCON, I could see his eyes light up a little bit. And he's a player that's never won anything in his career. I think he's made the final of a French Cup or two, um, but he doesn't have a trophy. And I could see, although he's only been playing for Algeria for 18 months, I could see that he said, I really want to win something. I want to win an AFCON. And went straight into my head. It's like, okay, he's hungry to win something with the Algerian national team. That's really good news as well. So those are the two main points of insight that I took from the 20 minutes of the controlled interview. But these two players have been off to a flying start with Marseille. And that's not surprising because I think playing for Algeria and playing for Marseille, there's so many commonalities. You're talking about, of course, Mediterranean climate. You're talking about very passionate um, supporters that are involved, that demand nothing but the best, that will love you harder than anyone else, and also hate you harder than anyone else. So for me, Algerian players are compatible to play in Marseille because they know how to deal with that already, because they deal with it with their national team. I remember back in the day, Majid Bouguera, center half that used to play for many clubs, Charlton, and then eventually he goes on to Rangers, and the Scottish media asking him like, "Are you scared to play in the Old Firm derby against Celtic?" And he said, and he had just played a match against Guinea in 2007. I remember where Algeria loses 1-0 at home, and the players had to be they barricaded themselves in the dressing rooms of the stadium, and they were stoned. Their team bus was stoned as they left the stadium because they lost the match against Guinea and they didn't qualify to the 2008 African Cup of Nations. And I remember him almost like scoffing at the Scottish media, like, "Trust me, I'm okay. Like I've dealt with a lot of pressure playing for Algeria. It's not the Old Firm derby that's gonna mess me up." So yeah, Algerian players, they have that in them. They can deal with that pressure, and so I think they're naturally compatible to play for Marseille. And in addition to that, this version of Marseille under Roberto De Zerbi is even better for these two players, because Amin Gouiri is not a player that's very physical, that can chase down, the ball, that's gonna win aerial duels like Islam Slimani or Baghdad Bounedjah, his Algerian teammates with the national team. No, Amin Gouiri is a player that is very intelligent, very technical. I would say he's more technical than 80% of players on a football pitch. He just has something about him. You can see it just sometimes when he warms up and he's juggling. There's something that separates him. Very technical. but he's not gonna. Yeah, like I don't want to make the Karim Benzema comparison because it's a lazy one. They both played for Lyon, and he was called the next Benzema, but he has that about him. Cutting in from the left, uh, knows how to curl the ball, like the R1 technique when you're playing PlayStation, like Thierry Henry as well. Um, Uses his intelligence to get himself in the right positions. His finishing is really good too. So it's technical ability and finishing, but you don't really rely on him for his physique. And so with a De Zerbi side that has more of the ball, that is very dynamic, that scores a lot of goals, I love him. And De Zerbi saying, I want you to focus on being a center forward and being one of the best players in Europe at that position. That's good news for the Algerian national team as well because Islam Simani and Baghdad Bounedjah are aging and there's no clear replacement. So Gouiri can be that player. And I think he's going to blossom under De Zerbi. He already has, I think, 2 goals and 3 assists in 3 matches or something like that. And Bennacer, he played against De Zerbi when Bennacer was at Milan and De Zerbi was at Sassuolo in Italy. And since then, Bennacer 2 years ago said, "I like this coach and I would like to play under this coach." And his side plays real good football and everything. And he said what he was doing with Brighton is not a coincidence. And De Zerbi has the same mutual respect and admiration. And he said in Italy we have this expression saying "stop the music," which is basically like drop everything. Like, and he said when I heard that Ben Nasser was available, I told the club stop the music, do everything you can to bring this player here to the club. And so just when you have that kind of mutual confidence and respect for one another, and speaking about Ben Nasser's personality and even De Zerbi's personality, I think they're very compatible. And I think having that trust and Ben Nasser returning home because he grew up just an hour away from Marseille, in Arles, a city called Arles. All of these make me think like these are really good moves if Ben Nasser can just stay healthy. So yeah, those were my takeaways from the interviews really that I conducted before the weekend. Those were the good things at least. Now there is another thing that my third or fourth reflection is I was a little disappointed with some of their knowledge of Algeria and the Algerian national football team. And I'm gonna do this without trying to disparage the players because this isn't really a mark against the players because this is the majority of football players are like this as well. But the Olympique de Marseille communications team, they were doing social media capsules at around the same time that we were doing the interview just before us. And they would like quiz them, about certain things. Like, who do you think is better, Riyad Mahrez or Baghdad Bounedjah? And you pick Riyad Mahrez. Riyad Mahrez or this Algerian player. And you know that TikTok challenge where you just pick one and you keep going until the end. And there were times where like they wouldn't know an Algerian national team player, somebody that was very, very well known. And I'm not going to single out a player and I'm not going to single out a name. But immediately I thought, oh, okay, like if I would, and this is like a very arrogant thing to do, right? But if I was playing for the national team, the first thing I would do is check Wikipedia and read all the Wikipedia, and I would care so much. And so immediately in my list of questions, I had a section of the interview was called the Algeria Marseille quiz, and it was really talking about the deep links between Algeria, the Algerian national team, and Algeria as a country, and Marseille as a city and as a club. And I had things like, for example, the Algerian president, the first ever Algerian president, Ahmed Ben Bella, played a match for Marseille in the French Cup in 1939 to 1940. And initially I thought I would include this because it's so cool and it shows such a deep link between the club and the city and Algeria and the Algerian national team that like, I'm always thinking about storylines and storytelling and like, this is the continuation of this relationship and it's special and it's complex and it's deep layered and it's political and it's social and it's sporting. And then when I saw like those social media capsules, I realized, no, I got to remove this part of the quiz because there's a very good chance that these players don't know the answer. And if they don't know the answer here, then I don't want to embarrass them, especially in this role, like where I'm coming in as a partner of l'Olympique de Marseille and I'm contracted with the Ligue 1. Here, my job is to make these players look good. It's almost PR as much as journalism. So it's not my job to embarrass them. And even me personally, I wouldn't want to embarrass players, ever. But it's one of those things where I was thinking about it when I remember after in the airport on my way home, and I was thinking it's such a shame because, as a football player, you have the opportunity to do something that's unique, you know. And what's unique about it is, yes, you can make a lot of money in football or in other businesses. But for me, what's unique about being a footballer, if done the right way, is the connection you can get with people and with a city and with a club. fans can adore you. You know, there's can be that level of adulation that you can't get in almost any other maybe sector or work. Or maybe an artist can have that, but and if you're not focusing on that, if you're not focusing on, you know, building a legacy in that sense, like everything else is gonna go. You know, trust me, you're gonna spend your money, and even if you don't, your money's gonna it's not gonna when you die, it's gonna go. You know, you can't take your money with you to the grave. But building that legacy, you know, past your death, it's almost eternal, you know, like, and players have that opportunity. And for me, it's still one of the things as a 33-year-old man that can make me get a little bit emotional is when I see, you know, a player go back to a club and there's that standing ovation. And it's like, you know, it's like, and it usually comes when fans respect a player because a player goes past their contractual obligations, right? They're not Benoit Asuikoto who just shows up for his 9 to 5 and goes home. It's like, okay, yeah, you just had to do this, but you did more. Maybe it's charity work on the side. Maybe, you know, it's coming back from an injury and risking your career because you wanted to help the club out. It can be so many different things. And it's not a case of having to stay at a club, at a single club for your entire career. I'm thinking about, for example, Eduardo at Arsenal, you know, and him coming back with Shakhtar Donetsk and scoring a goal against Arsenal in the entire Emirates Stadium, standing up to apply to him. That moment gave me goosebumps, you know. It's like no matter who you play for, no matter what you do, you're one of us. And there are players that do so much at clubs, but the way that they leave the club, because they're chasing something else, they prioritize something else in their career. It's not the relationship with players or with fans. They'll never be, you know, that loved, you know. And I think about Robin van Persie. Robin van Persie played 8 years at Arsenal, or 7 or 8 years at Arsenal, nearly catches Thierry Henry's goal scoring record. He's, I want to say, top five Arsenal goal scorers ever, maybe definitely top 10. And because he prioritizes winning a trophy over building that relationship with supporters and leaving a legacy, now he's homeless. He no longer has a home in English football. Maybe Feyenoord in Holland or something, but he spent what 10, 11 years in English football, and Manchester United, he doesn't really feel like a Manchester United legacy player, and Arsenal, he doesn't really feel like an Arsenal legacy player either. And I just think that is such a shame. For me, those are players that you can. It's okay. Everybody has the right to prioritize what they want. It can be trophies, it can be money, but the other thing is something that, like I said, you can make money, and trophies is a purely selfish, personal thing. But once you understand that building, you know, like a legacy, building a connection with the fans, you can't get that anywhere else. And for me, one of the best ways to do that is to understand the ethos of the club, the spirit of the club, you know, or of the national team. And so for me, it's like, okay, you know, the Algerian national team has such a deep history. The FLN team, you know, Ben Bella playing at Marseille, this, that. Like, surely these players, you know, like they understand that the opportunity that's in front of them, and they're gonna take it with both hands. And when I see like how it's not how little they knew, but when I see that it's not that they're not as well read as me or something. I don't want to put it off that way, but you could see like most, you know, they're playing for the Algerian national team because it's part of their career, and they like, maybe they feel Algerian, they like playing for the Algerian national team, they feel proud about doing it, but there's so much they could do, you know, just a few more steps, you know, and they could be legendary in the eyes of fans. And so yeah, I thought about that a lot as my third reflection. I'll give you one more example. Karim Benzema, October 17, 2022, he wins the Ballon d'Or. The Ballon d'Or is at Théâtre de Châtelet. It's in the middle of Paris. And that's where the ceremony is. 50 meter, or let's say 5, 6 minutes away. I was gonna say 50 meters, but I think it's a little bit longer than that. There's the Pont Saint Michel. And the Pont Saint Michel is where Algerian uh, Algerians living in France in 1961 during the Algerian Revolution were holding um a protest, and they were killed. Hundreds of them were killed, and they were thrown into the Seine River. And under this most recent French government, Emmanuel Macron actually erected, you know, a monument in honor of those Algerians that were killed on the 17th of October 1961. So Benzema, 61 years later, on the exact same day, a couple of minutes away from the Pont Saint Michel, wins the Ballon d'Or. And in my head, I'm thinking, man, like, how legendary. And this is I'm not going to take credit for this idea. This is another journalist. We have this discussion fairly often. And he said, what if he just left the room, you know, didn't say a word to anybody? And all the journalists are scrambling around. And they're saying, "What's he doing?" And they're running after him in the middle of Paris. Everybody's dressed to the nines, and he goes straight to the Pont Saint Michel. And he just poses in front of the monument. Like they would write books about that. There would be studies about that. And so these are the thoughts that were going through my mind. Like, do players understand the opportunity that they have? And I think most of them don't. But then the reason why this changed my perspective as well, because I had the conversation with a few other, close people to me, and I was thinking, is it unfair to? It's not because we don't expect them to do this, but is it unfair to even talk about this? What if it was flipped? What if they say, "Oh, you're a journalist. You have such a great opportunity to, become the best journalist in the world, and you're not doing. Oh, you're a civil engineer in Cairo. Oh, you have such a great opportunity to build the best buildings in the world. Oh, you're not a world class civil engineer. You're not transforming the lives of everybody, everyday people. Oh, that's you don't understand the opportunity you have. So like flipping it, you realize like, oh yeah, it's not as evident as it seems, right? So it's unfair, and you can't sort of influence or push players to want to do this on their own. It has to come from within. It has to be natural. And I think overall, it just makes us appreciate the players that do understand social political implications of what they do, and understanding, also the connection that you're supposed to have to one club and to one national team. Player like Mohamed Abu Trika, for me, completely understood it. And that's why he's legendary, and he'll always be legendary. Um, the political activism, the social things that he does in terms of helping people out in their poverty, actions taken on the pitch, including during the Port Said massacre, where he's holding people and giving, life-saving treatment, medical treatment in a locker room as they're dying in his arms. The fact that, and this is why at the AFCON in 2019, when he's, considered a terrorist for better or for worse, or for, I should say, like, pretty much considered a terrorist or whatever the case may be. Um, in the 22nd minute of every single match, all the Egyptian national team supporters, doesn't matter if they're supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, doesn't matter if they, whatever, they're Coptic Christian, or everybody lights their flashlight on their phone and pays homage to him in every single match. And to this day, he still gets that respect. Not just in Egypt. He gets that respect in Algeria and Morocco and Tunisia. He gets standing ovations everywhere he goes. People understood that Muhammad Abu Trika sort of played football for the people. And he was a great football player. And it mostly works out if you're a legendary football player as well on the pitch. But when you do that, he built that connection. Like I said, not just with Al Ahly, not just with the Egyptian national team, but even with many, many African football fans as well. And it's not just Abu Trika, like Frederick Kanute as well, in my opinion, to a lesser extent, has that as well. Um, of course, Muhammad Ali in boxing, you know, same thing. You could tell he calls himself the people's champ, but that's what it was. He boxed for the people. Yes, he boxed because he wanted to be the world champion and everything. But at a certain point, when it was time to put people first ahead of his boxing career, he did it. He did that. So yeah, like I said, it's a little bit unfair for me to expect Ismail Bennacer Amine Gouiri to be like Muhammad Ali. It's very, very unfair actually. But these are just some of the reflections I had, and it makes me go away expecting a lot less of players. Um, like I said, when you have very limited access to players, maybe on the, you're only going to speak to this player once. You kind of want to tell them like, hey, like, why don't you do this? But they're just playing football, man. They're just living their lives like me and you. They have a family. Maybe they don't want to do that, and if they don't want to do that, who are we to fault them, right? So yeah. Overall, I grew a little bit from that trip. I think I became a little more mature. I think a little bit less of footballers, which I think is the natural course of things. And yeah, other than that, I didn't watch too much football. Just a note about some of the racism that some of the African players faced in European leagues. Four African players were racially abused in Europe. Hannibal Mejbri, Burnley versus Preston in the Championship. Iñaki Williams and Marwan Sanadi, playing for Athletic Bilbao, were racially abused by Espanyol fans. And Mehdi Dorval, playing for Bari, he was racially abused by a player playing for Chesena. So three North Africans, Tunisian, Moroccan, and Algerian, and a Ghanaian. And it's one of those where, like, this happens on, I don't know, like every 3 4 months now. And you always just make, like, hashtags, say no to racism, We make these vague statements. We have to do more. We have to do more. Is there a solution? Honestly, like it happens so often that like it's one of those subjects that I tend to avoid, like VAR, just because what is there to say? But the one thing that I did think of that I think perhaps um could be implemented is why not mic up players? Because they do this in North American sports and they mic them up. And now the players wear, GPS trackers underneath their shirt where it would be easier to fit a mic in. And you don't have to mic up everybody, but let's say the spinal column of a team, center halves, center midfielders, and forwards. Um, and that could be one way, where that can be monitored. I think players' unions might not be happy about that because they might be worried that, players might say other things or tactical things. Even clubs might not be happy. They might be very, very wary of that, having, player audio broadcast or in the hands of some people, not even broadcast. But that could be something where it would be a lot easier to make decisions. I think mandatory training for any player signing in one of those top leagues, Premier League. Because I remember one of the stories was Luis Suarez versus Patrice Evra. Yeah. And I remember for Suarez versus Evra, Suarez said like, I used a word in Uruguay that's not considered racist. Maybe he took it the wrong way, maybe. Which I mean, some people said was an excuse. Some people said no, it's true. I don't know. I'm obviously not cultured enough to make that kind of determination. But if you take mandatory race training upon signing in the Premier League and you say, look, anything, like, doesn't matter if it's okay in your country, this is not okay, not okay, not okay, no allusion to color at all. And if you do, then we have to increase the punishments. That's the final thing I think I would implement is I would even punish up to like 6 months to 1 year. Maybe say, hey, if you racially abuse a player and you're caught, you have to leave the league for good, or you have to leave Europe's top five leagues for. If you and go in with heavy-handed punishments, and players know that coming in with the mandatory, race training, I think in that case we could start seeing less of these incidents. But it's never ever really, really gonna go away. And we always talk about Europe and the top five leagues in Europe. It happens less in Africa, a lot less in Africa, but we still sometimes get racist, xenophobic abuse. And in Algeria, we get a lot of fans swearing at players and their mothers and stuff like that. And I remember there was a campaign by the Algerian Federation saying, "Please keep our mothers out of the stadium" or something like that. So yeah, it's one of those where heavy-handed approach is, I think, the main solution. That and rely on technology. We have, boom microphones now that can pick up everything on a pitch. Players are wearing GPS trackers, fit a tiny microphone on them, they wouldn't even feel it. And that way we could definitely catch more culprits and worry about this less. But anyways, that's enough for today. I just wanted to check in really quickly, and we'll be back in a few days to recap the CAF Interclub draw for the CAF Confederation Cup and the CAF Champions League. I hope everybody's doing well, and speak to you all soon. Peace.